Hello, welcome to the MuseScore Cafe for today, February 24th, 2021. My name is Mark Sabatella, and I'm the director of the Mastering MuseScore School. This is my weekly series of chats where I talk about using MuseScore and making music. And I know I told some of you last week, I told everyone last week that I was going to try to have some theme music together. Been too many other things going on for me to get that happening yet, but that's still in the cards. So let me get the chat going here so I can see what people are saying as they've been checking in. Hello, hello, chat. Huh? Am I live? I have to once again make sure things are working technically. Yeah. Okay. There we go. I am working, and hello everyone. Fort Collins and Littleton here in Colorado. I see Utah, Netherlands, UK, fantastic. Virginia and Finland, fantastic. Um, okay, so one of the reasons I always pick a topic to talk about, and if you're not on my mailing list and getting notifications about things, let me just put in the link to my website because it's highly recommended. Um, that you go and sign up for my newsletter so you can get notifications about things like what my topic is going to be and just all sorts of other things. And the topic that I have chosen for today is to talk about entering music and doing things in MuseScore using your keyboard, but also doing things without a keyboard or even a mouse. These are both ways of interacting with MuseScore that are a little maybe outside of how most people do most things. And so I'm going to uh, want to talk about some of these things, and in the process, maybe you'll see some features you didn't know about while I'm showing how to use things with the keyboard or without a mouse. And I should mention that one of the reasons why I'm picking this topic, well, the main reason it was on my mind, is I'm actually doing a presentation this weekend for the National Association for Music Education. It's kind of the main music educators. It's not a union; it's a whatever organization you belong to, because there's also teachers unions. This is something different. In any case, they were supposed to have their big annual convention in November. It got canceled due to COVID, but they're doing an online version of it this weekend. And so I'm going to be doing a presentation on teaching music to blind and visually disabled, visually impaired musicians. So the that's the title of the presentation, and it's not all about MuseScore, but I'm certainly going to talk about MuseScore in it. And one of the things, if you're blind, you typically will use software by using keyboard shortcuts only. You basically can't use a mouse because you can't see the cursor on the screen, and then there'll be a screen reader that reads to you what's going on. And so we've implemented a lot of things in MuseScore to make it very keyboard friendly, more keyboard friendly than probably most other notation programs, where almost everything in MuseScore can be done via keyboard. Now, in some cases, it's maybe a little more awkward than doing things with the mouse, but in some cases, it's actually a lot more efficient. And so, a lot of the things that we've done to make MuseScore be keyboard controllable is not just to make it more accessible, but also to make it more efficient, make it more um, just easier to work with, faster to do things, which is why we usually use the term keyboard shortcuts for a lot of these things. So I'm going to show you some of these things, but also show you other ways of navigating MuseScore with that. But in conjunction with that, since I'm also talking uh, to school teachers, basically, they do a lot of work with what are called interactive whiteboards. Smartboard is kind of the brand name that's the most familiar of interactive whiteboard. And it's basically a giant large screen TV that's a touch screen. And so a lot of teachers do their lessons displayed on one of those, and you can actually run MuseScore on one of these large screen displays. But when you do that, you don't have easy access to the keyboard or to a mouse. And so now it's all done by touch. And so I want to show you, we haven't done a lot in MuseScore to make it touch friendly, but there are some little tricks and things. And so I'll show a little bit of that also. And then, as always, you have questions about things, I'll just try to answer them, and I'll try to answer them in a way that I can tie into whatever else I wanted to talk about. Okay, so first thing I have to do is go turn on my keyboard thing, which I have now simplified and improved so that as I press things, good, we'll see the keystrokes that I'm pressing. So a lot of things that are anything in the menu in MuseScore, you can access via keyboard even without knowing shortcuts by pressing Alt and whatever underlined letter. This is true across almost every single program. You see the F of file is underlined. So if I press Alt F, it opens the file menu. And this is a really nice convenient. I almost never click the menus anymore. I pretty much always use the shortcut for that. And then within the menu, you can also use the cursor keys to navigate around. And if there is a keyboard shortcut for a command, it shows it to you right there, like save is Control S. Probably you already knew that because it's Control S in almost every single program. So these are keyboard shortcuts that work even if you're not in the menu. So if I press Escape, get out of the menu, and I press Control S, it's going to pop up the save dialog. So uh, those are shortcuts. But in addition to that, you'll also see underlined letters like Open Recent. You'll see the R is highlighted, is underlined there. In Parts, you'll see the T is underlined there. What that means is that while I'm in the menu, if I press T, I think actually, yeah, there we go. Because this menu opens a side menu, I actually had to get out of that side menu before it would start responding. But T will take me right to parts. So within all the menus, then we get back to the file menu, you'll see many of the things, if it doesn't have a direct keyboard shortcut, many of the things like export, you see the E is underlined. So if I just press E, it'll go directly to export. And same within the edit menu. For instance, preferences has the P underlined. So if I want to get to preferences, I can press Alt E, P, and that will take me directly to the preferences dialog. That type of navigation is common across almost every program, that it will Alt plus a letter will open a menu, and then some of the menu items will have what are called mnemonics, the underlined letter that tells you that letter will take you directly there. So you can start moving around the menu system with keyboard only very easily. And that's always a nice feature. And then, as we saw within the menu system, there are keyboard shortcuts. Control Alt Shift S for style menu. To be honest, I don't know if that is a default shortcut or if I installed that myself because I've installed a lot of custom shortcuts. So that is telling me if I press Control Shift Alt and S, it better open the style dialog. I actually didn't remember that that was the case. And so I'm actually curious now if that was there by default. So I'm going to go to Preferences. I'm going to go to Alt E. And then I'm used to I forget about the mnemonics. I forget that P will get me to Preferences. I know that up arrow will take me to Preferences because it's the last thing in the list. So up arrow cycles around to the bottom. So I usually go Alt E and then up arrow to get to Preferences. I think I'm going to try to get in the habit of using P though. So within here now, also within dialogues, uh, if it's a tabbed dialog like this, the arrow keys will move you from tab to tab. Um, And there's some things that I'm going to find easier to do using my mouse, like dragging this dialog to get it out of the way of the display of the keys. You'll see also there's a search box down here, and I can press Tab to get. Oh, it's moved. That's interesting. It moved my little display. I was trying to get out of your way, and it's just following me. Isn't that curious? Okay, well, that's a thing. Um, if I'll click down in the search box, and if I type what I'm looking for the style dialog. Edit style is Control Alt Shift S. I want to reset to default and see. Yeah, I must have defined that one myself because I didn't remember that that was one. But let's see how to do that. I press define and I'll just enter it again. Control Alt Shift S. And then I can click add. And this dialog is actually accessible also. You can access all these dialogues just using cursor keys and tab. The tab key moves you around the various buttons in the dialog, which would be more obvious if the display of the keys wasn't covering the dialog as I did that. So anyhow, um, you can define your own shortcuts for a large number of commands. Like this is the full list of commands in MuseScore. These are all things that are either in the menus or that have shortcuts defined. And you'll see a lot of things don't have shortcuts. Like there's a command I use pretty often to exchange voices. This is usually under the Tools menu. Tools, Voice, Voices, and then you'll see Exchange Voices 1 and 2. There's all these different commands to do these things that don't have shortcuts, but I can define shortcuts for all of these things. So like I'm never going to remember this because I'm so used to using the menu for it, but I could define, and you can even have multiple keyboard, how would I put it, a sequence of things. So if I want, say, I have to think about what's actually available, but Control Alt V, I've got that defined for something else. Let me clear that. Try again. Control Shift V. Nope, that's something else too. I want voice. How about exchange? No, I'm just gonna Shift Alt V. Here we go. So Alt Shift V followed by 1 followed by 2. I'm going to define that to be exchanging voices 1 and 2. Except I must not have done it because it didn't show up here. What did I do? Who knows what I did? So let's try that again. Shift Alt V, 1, 2. Oh, it conflicts with edit style. Seriously? That's impossible. That is not right. So I don't know what that's about, to be honest. But uh, take my word for it, it really does work. So I'm going to try tick 1, 2 as my shortcut. There we go. Tick 1, 2, and then I can make uh, tick 1, 3 be the shortcut for exchanging voices 1 and 3, and so forth. And then when you do this, you just type these things. So I can enter some notes in voice 1, enter some notes into voice 2. Now, let's try it. Tick 1, 2. You ready? There we went. It just flipped them around for me. That's kind of cool that I could have a shortcut that was just a single thing to remember, the tick followed by the two voices that I wanted to exchange. So it's a very powerful facility for defining shortcuts. So a lot of those commands, again, uh, you'll see a lot of commands have shortcuts already, and this is one way to learn them. If they're in the menu, you'll see the shortcut listed in the menu, but for things that aren't in the menu, you'll see this is a way of viewing your shortcuts in the shortcut dialog here. So, and then you can define ones that if there's commands in here that you're like, ooh, I use this command a lot. I wish there was a shortcut for it, like reset, layout, stretch. I actually do that fairly often. I should define a shortcut for it, but I'm not going to do that right now. I want to show you some other navigational things. So one is uh, there are shortcuts in the view menu. If I go to the view menu, you'll see the function keys are used to open the various side panels and extra windows and things. So the ones that I typically open and close the most is the inspector, which is F8 will open and close the inspector. Also for the mixer, F10 opens the mixer. It doesn't close it again, which is sort of odd, but escape does. F9 opens and closes the palette. So those are some shortcuts that I use fairly often. And then within any given window, tab usually moves you around. So let me go back to the preferences dialog, and this time I'm going to use a different tab here. I'm going to use um, the general tab. The tab key here, you can see the highlight now is on start empty. When I press tab again, it moves down to the next thing that you can enter. Tab will just move you around the various fields within a dialog, and that's how, again, you can get through most dialogues entering things just using the keyboard. You have to, it's like right now, show tours is highlighted. That's not necessarily obvious, but if you're a blind user, you'll have a screen reader attached and it will actually be reading show tours right now. So moving around dialogues you can generally do with the cursor keys and tab, but for most of us, that's not necessarily faster than just clicking in the boxes. But what is actually quite interesting that we implemented not just um, not just for usable, not just for use with a screen reader, but also for anyone, is ways of navigating the palettes. Like if you think about it, so someone was looking for the symbol for open on the palettes recently. The little circle that means to play this string open or to play a open hi-hat. It's a little circle you put above the note to mean that. And they weren't sure where to find that circle, that thing. Well, I can show you how to do that. There's a shortcut that will take you right to this search box here in the palette, and it's Control F9. Control F9 moves the cursor directly to that search box, and now I can type open. Ooh, look at that. I guess I was still in the menus. So let me hit escape, get out of all this again, and try that again. Control F9. And then I type open. Okay, so obviously, this isn't working the way I'm expecting it to. Well, I know it's not working the way I'm expecting it to, and to be honest, I'm not sure why. Control F9 is not putting me in the palette. So am I wrong that that's the shortcut? That's a question. Let's find out. I might have customized it. Let's see. Palette search, Control F9. So I have a feeling it's this utility that's showing you my keystrokes is actually fighting me here, and it's not correctly putting the focus where it should be. So I'm just going to click in here, and now I'm going to type open. So when I type open, it's showing you all the symbols that have open in their name. And then I can use the cursor keys. This is the open key signature. And then this is the open articulation. So let me get out of here for a second. Let me click a note. And now if I go back to, again, Control F9 should move me there. And now it is. I don't know what was happening. It just didn't let me type yet. But the cursor, if I move down to open and press enter, it just entered that articulation here. So what this is showing is that you don't actually need the mouse to use the palettes. This is a relatively new thing. We implemented this just over a year ago, actually, and I demonstrated this in a cafe shortly after that when I brought on my student Elizabeth to kind of be the first person to get to try this out. And it's a nice feature in that once you've found this, I can now easily, there's not a shortcut for that. But if I know I want to use that a lot, there is a shortcut that you can define to reapply the last palette element. So here, apply current palette element, I have defined to be backslash. I think it's not defined by default. Oh, I guess maybe it is. Well, let me select this. Yeah, it wasn't defined by default, but I had defined it to be backslash. So what that means is now I can apply that open sign just by pressing the backslash. So if you have a particular symbol that doesn't have a shortcut, apply it once using whatever means you normally would use, say, clicking the rest. Like here, let me do it for the Volta now. That applied it, but now I can apply additional ones just by pressing slash. And now I'm using a combination of clicking and keyboard because, for what I'm doing here, that feels the most natural to me. So that's backslash as a way of reapplying the most recently used palette item is a pretty cool shortcut that allows you to then add the same symbol multiple times, um, just using a shortcut, even if it doesn't have a shortcut. So that's always a good thing to know. It's also good to know that if I have a bunch of notes that I want to apply that open to, if I select them all. Oh, and how did I do that selection? I did it here with Shift and the left arrow. Shift plus the arrow keys extends the selection by however you're moving. So if I now select those notes, I can click the open articulation in here and it applies it to everything in that selection. Or again, if you don't want to click, I can use my shortcut to get back to the palette. Control F9 will take me back to the palette, and then I can cursor to get back to that symbol and press enter. So those are some things you can do navigating by keyboard alone. It's also the case that if you're in the score and then you press Shift Tab, that moves the cursor out of the score to whatever the previous window is, and in this case, it's the palettes. So see what happened here? I'm in the score. Say I've got something selected in the score. Maybe I've got a couple of measures selected. And then I pressed Shift Tab. And when I did that, you can see that the thing that was most recently selected in the palette is now selected again. So I have transferred keyboard focus to the palettes. And now I can use the arrow keys to move around. I can also come back up to the search window. I want to go back to the search window, but up arrow doesn't get me there. I guess Control F9 when in doubt and clear that thing. Because if nothing is in the search window, then the up and down arrows will just let me navigate all the way through the palettes. I can open the Noteheads palette with the right arrow, close it with the left arrow, move around, and I do this some. It's sometimes nice to be able to do these things without clicking, and just by using the keyboard. And I'm more sensitive to this because I do work with blind musicians and I'm showing them these things. But then eventually I get kind of hooked on doing these things, and I will use this. So, are there more endings other than first and second? Absolutely. So, if I want to add, uh, first of all, there's a first ending, a second ending, and a third ending. If you're not already in the advanced workspace up here on the toolbar, be in the advanced workspace. That's the one that's, the basic workspace has only got a limited selection of symbols. The advanced workspace has more symbols. And so you'll see that there is a third ending at least. So there's my third ending. But if you want it to be seventh ending, whatever, click the thing, open the inspector if you've closed it like I have. So F8 reopens the inspector. And now within the inspector, you will see all these different fields, and my face might be just covering up what we need here, or maybe it's not, I'm not sure, but you'll see there's text there to define which ending it is. And so 3, I changed that to 7, and now it's a seventh ending. So hopefully you could see that, but if not, trust me, it's right there, right by my face. So that's where you would set the text to show as 7. To actually affect the playback, because you could actually put last time in there, but you'd have to tell MuseScore what that means. So in order to actually affect the playback at the very bottom, and this probably is covered by my face, the very bottom, let me unattach. You can, by the way, drag the inspector away, undock it like I just did here. So now we can see at the very bottom of the inspector is the repeat list. And this is what controls the playback. It's not controlled by the text, it's controlled by this. So normally these should be in agreement, and yeah, someday we'll figure out how to get them connected automatically. But for now, the text is how you control what displays there, and the repeat list is what controls how it actually plays back. Um, so Kika was asking a question about rest. We're not changing. I changed the note. So Kika, I'm not totally sure what you are asking me there. Feel free to try to ask that again. And Colleen was wondering about the small circle for diminished. So actually, let me put the inspector back where it normally goes. I'm just going to dock it again. By the way, I did it by dragging it back there. Depending on your system, double click of the title bar might also redock it. It doesn't work on all operating systems or on Linux. It doesn't work with all window managers, but it definitely works on some. But otherwise, just drag it back to, and you'll see this docking station appear. Right? This, if I drop, that didn't go to the docking station. But if I keep dragging, now I see the docking station appear, and when I drop it, it shows up there. All right, so this particular symbol is meant to be the symbol used in uh, for open, for an open string, open hi hat, etc. For a diminished, usually what for chord, for Control K is the shortcut for chord symbol. If I type C sharp, and I just use the number sign to be a sharp, and then the letter O, that's what the symbol for diminished will be. And so it displays in a font in which the O looks roughly like a diminished sign. But depending on the particular font you have, like if you're using the jazz style, like if I create a new score with Control N and I select, and this dialog, by the way, is perfectly uh, accessible by keyboard also. I'm just using the arrow to move through it. But if I select the Jazz lead sheet template, it uses a font in which the diminished sign will appear superscripted, so as a circle. And also, if you're using the Roman numeral facility, which I've defined a shortcut for, Control Alt R, otherwise it's under the Add menu, Control Alt R, and I type sharp 1 diminished, you get the circle automatically there. And Michael, you might be interested. I don't know if I've showed you this before, but we now have Nashville notation implemented also. So I can type 1. Actually, I don't know. Does Nashville use the circles? I guess we do. I don't know if you normally do in your use of Nashville notation, but we now have Nashville notation in there, and it does some what we think is going to be reasonable formatting. So those are some of the different things that you can control by keyboard. There's actually like almost everything. Um, so can I? Oh, the shortcut. So Gene, yeah, and I saw you just asked about this on the forum, and it's already been answered. But absolutely. And I'll show you how to navigate the toolbar also. If I'm entering notes onto, I can enter notes. Whoops. Let me enter notes here and Control down, move by octave. If I now want to go back and enter a voice too, it's Control Alt and the voice number. Control Alt 2. So now I can enter C down here. And these are the same shortcuts used to move notes between voices. Like this note that I currently have selected here, the G, if I want to move it to voice 3, Control Alt 3 moves it to voice 3, or Control Alt 2 moves it back to voice 2. So it does the same thing that the voice buttons does, Control Alt and the number. And that's one of the built-in ones. That's not one I customized myself. So yeah, those shortcuts are there too. And so pretty much everything on the toolbar either has a built-in shortcut or you can define them. So James is saying that on Mac, those underline letters within the menu aren't there. So yeah, maybe there's a different way of doing that on Mac. I've never owned a Mac and I've only used them a few times, so I don't know how the mnemonic system works on Mac, or maybe they don't have that concept. I don't know. Um, so would a blind person be able to select the font that like I just did? So yes, absolutely. So what I actually did wasn't so much selecting the font, right? I didn't select the font. I used Control N to create the score, and then here in the list of templates, I went and selected the jazz, and I'm doing this all with the arrow keys, and then right arrow to expand this, jazz lead sheet, enter, enter. So I just did that all without the mouse, and that gave me the ability to have um, that. But let me now, Control Tab moves you between your open scores. Let's say I want to enter some text, and I want to change the font of that text. Well, that font change is normally done in the inspector. So somehow we need to get focus over to the inspector. Well, I mentioned Shift Tab moves back to the previous window, and that got me to the palettes. Tab will move to the next thing. So it's going to move my focus over to the inspector. So you can't necessarily tell right now, but oh, actually I can see it's on the toolbar. The order of the focus is because I closed the inspector and reopened it, it's not in the same place anymore. But now you can see that I've gotten keyboard focus to the toolbar, and now I can hit the arrow keys to move around the toolbar. And again, MuseScore will, if you have a screen reader attached, will read these things aloud. So that's a way you can access the toolbar uh, with just the keyboard. And then once you're all the way through the toolbar, and I'm pressing tab, 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 eventually it moves me to the inspector. Right now, I'm in the inspector. I can see that automatic placement is selected now. Tab again, you can see that minimum distances. Tab again, stacking order. Tab again, something else. I don't know where I am right now, but I'll keep going. It's probably on one of those reset buttons. Yeah. All right, now finally the cursor is there on the font, and I can select the font. Now, of course, if you're a blind user, you don't necessarily know what these fonts look like, but I'm using the arrow keys to change them. And if someone tells, if you know you want the Garamond font, then by all means, the arrow keys will move you through there and get you to the Garamond font. And then when you're done messing with the inspector, hitting escape always returns the focus to the score. And by the way, here's another new thing that was added specifically for accessibility reasons, but is quite useful. When I pressed escape a bunch of times, nothing is selected. And I do that periodically. I'll press escape just to make sure I'm out of every other mode. But now I've lost my selection. If I want to get back to where I was before, and maybe I've scrolled off the screen and I've really just lost everything, and where am I now? Shift L for location. Shift L will reselect whatever note was the most recently selected note, or whatever note is closest to where, like if you had a bar line selected, it'll actually bring you back to a note. So, so yeah, if either of you, James or Michael, if you know about uh, how menu mnemonics work on Mac in general, um, do you normally see underlines on your menus, or because maybe that's just a Windows and Linux thing? Maybe that's just something that macOS doesn't have. But if macOS normally has it, but it's not working with MuseScore, that's something that we should definitely know about. And the other question is, does it not work, or does it just not show up? Like if you actually go Alt F to open the file menu, and then P for print, does that open the print dialog? Now you might, Alt F might not be your menu because Mac menu system is different also. So unfortunately, I don't have a whole lot of insight into Mac specific stuff, but I'd love to hear the answer. Um, uh, so yeah, I'd love to, if you guys can tell me what you know about the menu mnemonics, that would be great. So those are really pretty much everything that I wanted to that I knew I wanted to show as far as this navigation by keyboard. You can see that we got through all those toolbars, we got through the inspector, we got through the palettes. I was able to open menus, I was able to open dialogues. There's only a couple of things. Like let me go back to the style dialog, which now I remember is Control Alt Shift S. Um, the cursor keys will move down the left column, and then tab moves me over to the right column, and then cursor keys will change a setting, or tab to move to different fields. When you're on a checkbox, spacebar checks it and unchecks it. So all dialogues are generally traversable with tab and arrow keys using fairly standard shortcut, like which things require tab, which things require arrow keys. That's all kind of built into how dialogues work, and it's the same across all programs for the most part. There's only a couple of windows in MuseScore that don't work well with keyboard shortcuts, and one of them is the mixer. So when I open the mixer and I start pressing tab, it will move through the different controls. Like I can see channel here is is highlighted there, and now reverb, and now chorus, and now volume, and now pan. But it's at some point, like there's all these controls down here in this in the graphic slider section that it can be really hard or perhaps even impossible to get to. And okay, now I'm on the main slider. I can see that because I'm moving that slider. I don't know where I am now. If I had the screen reader turned on, it would be reading me more stuff. But accessing the mixer with just the keyboard is not fun, and doesn't entirely work. So that's one of the few things that's not, and it's being completely redesigned for MuseScore 4 anyhow. So we're probably just going to live with that. But virtually everything else I can do with just the keyboard, which is fantastic. Um, so if you can't, so can you normally, does Alt F open the file menu in other programs? That's the question. Because if Mac just doesn't support that, Mac doesn't support that. But if it does support it and MuseScore isn't taking advantage of it, that's definitely something we would want to know about. I just don't know Mac, so I don't know. But this isn't built. This isn't special MuseScore stuff. This is the fact that these Alt F and things work. This is standard stuff on Windows and Linux, and so we didn't have to do anything special to make that happen. It was sort of built into the libraries we use to create the menus in the first place. It knows how to do this stuff for us. So if Mac doesn't support it, then there's probably nothing we can do about it. But if it does, then probably there's some option we need to pass those libraries to tell them to make it work. Yeah, so it's probably not a thing on Mac, I guess, is the deal. So that's kind of too bad, but it has a lot of other lovely qualities. So I said that I wanted to cover use of keyboard, but I also want to briefly touch on not having a keyboard and not having a mouse. And the reason I had that in my mind was, as I mentioned, because in this presentation, I'm going to be talking to people who are accustomed to using things on these interactive whiteboards. Well, my screen here is a touch screen, and the machine I'm on right now, it's a laptop with a touch screen. But I also use on a machine that has a detachable keyboard. So I use MuseScore on my Microsoft Surface. And my Microsoft Surface, the keyboard is completely detachable. So you can hold it as a tablet. And then at that point, you don't really have a mouse per se. You have touch, and you don't have a keyboard because it's not attached. Well, there's almost nothing in MuseScore that requires the keyboard. But it is a little surprising how awkward some things can be to do by touch only. Certainly on a small screen, me trying to touch my way in, like, okay, let's say I want to change some. Okay, first of all, if I want to move the canvas around, I'm doing this by dragging. I've got my finger and I'm dragging the canvas. Let's say I want to change that font size. I can tap the title, come over to the font size. Now, can I hit these? Can I get with my fat fingers the down arrow here. No, I want to make it bigger. I'm going to go to the up arrow. Can I do that? Eh, oh, wrong one, right? That is actually pretty hard to do by touch because the button is too dang small. Yeah, I could keep fighting this thing. Now, is there a way, can I drag my finger up? No. So there are some things like that that on a small screen like mine, it's like a 13-inch screen. It's not small, small, but it's too small for those arrows to be easily accessed by touch. But on an interactive whiteboard, those buttons would be big enough. So that's something that could be a little bit awkward to do by touch alone. Um, but there's some other things, like what I've discovered for note entry. Like if I want to enter some notes into this measure, I can tap the note entry button, and then I can start tapping into the staff to enter my notes, which is kind of nice. But again, my finger is way too fat to be accurate. If I want to get an E right now, man, not even close. E, finally got an E, right? That's a little hard. So yes, I can zoom in. Oh, and I'm zooming in right now with control and my mouse wheel, but on at least, let me get out of note input mode. On some systems, I can do a pinch to zoom gesture, but it doesn't work on this. I think it works on my Surface. So instead, I can come here to my zoom drop down and go with say 400%. So now if oops, I'm still using keyboard. Note, input, and now I can a little more accurately type my notes, right? So that's good. But what I've actually found is under the view menu, and here accessing the menus also by touch is a little bit awkward. The piano keyboard. This ends up being a great device for entering notes for a number of reasons. One, because it's much accurate what note you're pressing on this keyboard, and you can make this bigger also. And again, because this keyboard doesn't support pinch to zoom, that's not going to work. But you can use the mouse wheel and kind of set this up. But again, on a big interactive touchscreen, that wouldn't be an issue. So the piano keyboard's way of entering notes is actually pretty cool. It's very useful for a lot of purposes, not just this touch interface. But the other thing that you can do now, the durations are way up there, and the piano keyboard is way down here. That's a drag, right? Well, drag. What if I take this toolbar and just drag it down next to my piano keyboard? Now I can set the duration by tapping and then enter a note, and then quarter note. At this point, I don't really want to be in 400% view, so I'm just going to use the mouse and go to, say, only 200%. But now you can see that I can change the duration and then enter a note just by touching, and the toolbar by dragging the toolbar down near the piano keyboard, or drag the piano keyboard up towards the toolbar. Either way works fine. So those are some things that you can do if you're trying to use MuseScore with a touch device. People often ask about, well, is there ever going to be an iPad app? Well, there's a lot of technical issues in getting MuseScore to run on an iPad. One is it's written in C++, and there's not a direct path to get C++ apps running on an iPad. There's indirect paths, but they're not necessarily well suited for MuseScore. Um, so assuming we solve that problem and then solve the other problems of all the libraries we use for things like playback, like the actual synthesizer is this third party library that doesn't exist for iPad, and there's a lot of problems to solve. But once those problems are solved, then you have this problem of, boy, this interface was not designed for touch. And if you see me struggling to click these little buttons on my 13-inch screen, you're going to stop. You're going to struggle on a smaller screen. So, can you use a stylus? Yeah, that's actually a good point. If I have a stylus, which I do somewhere, it will help a little bit, but realistically, not that much. those tiny little arrows over here next to these in these spin boxes are going to be hard to access with a stylus also. Um, so control scroll doesn't change the function of the scroll. So yeah, so you can, so first of all, scroll, uh, for me, at least on my system, mouse wheel, which is two finger swipe on my touchpad, mouse wheel scrolls up and down, shift mouse wheel scrolls sideways, control mouse wheel zooms in and out. And I'm pretty sure Mac has very similar things. But the question was about default view. So first of all, yes, you can go to the view menu and then, no, sorry, not view menu, preferences. Edit, preferences, and let me just do this. Oh, I have to get my focus back up to the tab bar here. There we go. So under the canvas tab, you'll see there's settings here for what the default zoom would be. So the default is 100%, which if everything is set up right on your screen, 100% zoom should be the exact same size as a sheet of paper. We detect the monitor resolution and do everything necessary to do that. But if there's anything not traditional about your monitor setup, you're trying to run through a TV screen using a VGA adapter or something like that. There's all sorts of things that can cause that to go wrong. And then you'll find 100% view is not life size. There's workarounds for that using command line options and things, but also you can just change your default zoom in here. So that will change what that default zoom is. You can also make it so that the default zoom is page width. Briefly, we experimented with making that the default. In fact, maybe it actually is the default now. I can't even remember because I customize so much. But you can make page width be the default. And some people like that. The page width option makes the page exactly the right width to fit. Let me get my toolbar back because it's kind of bugging me now not having it where it normally goes. There we go. And let me get rid of my piano keyboard. P is the shortcut for that. So the nice thing with page width is it adapts to the size of your screen. It adapts to the size of your window. It also adapts if I close the inspector or reopen the inspector and so forth. So the page width option is a nice one. And some people like to have that be their default view. And as I said, we at one point actually switched that as the default. Some people like it, some people don't. And so to be honest, I don't remember what the default is. So, um, so yeah, if you're mildly visually impaired and you want to see things large, okay. So maybe I think I knew that about you and I forgot that. So one thing to know also is you can produce um, not just zooming in on the screen. I mean, zooming in by setting your screen to be bigger. That's all well and good, but it's still printed going to be the same. So instead of doing that, what you might want, I've defined a shortcut control backslash to be to set my page size to be page width. I think that's not default, but or maybe it is, but I defined whatever. For me, control backslash is sets the page to page width. So, and then it toggles between that and whatever you were in before. So in this case, toggling between page width and 100%. So, if you're mildly visually impaired and you like to see things bigger, one thing to know about is in the page settings dialog. So I'm going to use page settings here. This is where the controls are for the size of the actual staff. So if I make my staff bigger, let me hit apply so you can see it bigger here. The paper stays the same size, but now the staff is bigger and everything else with it. Everything scales uniformly. So I could make 2.5 millimeters. What you're doing is literally setting the size of a staff space, the space between lines. So 2.5 millimeters for a staff space means the staff itself is 10 millimeters tall. So now I've got a bigger staff. And so that in itself could make things more readable. And when you print it, it's still a standard size sheet of paper. There's a set of guidelines that come from Great Britain, the Royal National Institute of Blind People, and they call their system modified stave notation. And in their system that they talk about, you don't want to just uniformly make things bigger, but you want to do some other things, some other adjustments. So I'm zooming in a little bit here. Um, they recommend other adjustments you might want to make, and we have a ton of these adjustments possible. If you come to the style dialog here, you can do all sorts of things like maybe I don't need that much space after my time signature. Maybe that when I the uh, made the measure bigger, it made that space bigger, but now that space is kind of wasted because now I can't fit as many measures on a line anymore. So maybe we don't want as much space between things. So I can set the system header with time signature distance to be smaller. And now that will be less space there. I can also have the minimum note distance be smaller. Where is that? Minimum note distance if I want. And so you can change things. You can change things like within the notes section here, you can make the stems thinner relative to everything else because I'm told that that's a thing that you might want to do. Whoa, not 0.5, but 0.05. There we go. So there's all sorts of adjustments that can be made to the thicknesses and relative positions of things proportionally to produce large print music that's sort of customized to how you might want it to look. So that the information that's important to you stands out and the rest of it kind of disappears. Like maybe the staff lines don't need to be that thick either. I think that was back in the measure uh, staff line thickness. Yeah, to be honest, I don't remember where half these settings are. I have to go find them again. So under system, boy, I want to know where that is now. Staff line, staff line. So it would be nice if there was a search box in here, right? Um, I really don't know where the staff line thickness is. Is it back under the score? Ah, someone tell me. Does anyone know where staff line thickness is? I know it exists. I would have thought it would have been under notes, staff line thickness, or under measure. But by gosh, oh, scroll down further. Ha ha ha, there it is. Okay. So staff line thickness, I can make my staff lines thinner or thicker also. Okay. So these are some of the things to know about. And also, just if you ever encounter completely blind students or people who are completely blind who want to be using MuseScore, I do always like to show off that also. And since I am doing this whole presentation on it, I'm going to turn on my screen reader. It's called Orca on Linux.
Screen reader on.
Hi, screen reader.
Orca for MuseScore 3. MuseScore 3 portable app image. Untitled asterisk frame 5 unfocused dialogues. Untitled label.
All right, I'm going to go to the beginning of the score.
Normal mode. Treble clef measure 1 beat 1 staff 1 piano. Untitled label.
If I want to navigate through my score, Alt, left, and right will navigate through every element in your score. You're probably used to using left and right to move note by note, and it'll skip things like bar lines, it skips text and everything. But if I use Alt and left or right, it's going to hit pretty much everything in the score. So Alt right now.
Time signature 4/4 time beat 1. Note G4 quarter voice 1 beat 1.
It's lagging a bit now because of the broadcast, I think. That's always my excuse. It doesn't normally drag like that.
Note C5 quarter voice 2 beat 1 articulation open.
So notice it read the note and it said what the articulation was on it. And then if I press Alt right again,
articulation open beat 1.
It actually transfers focus to the articulation itself. And so that way you can delete it and edit it as necessary. So you can actually use the keyboard to get to virtually every element in your score, to select every element in your score. And so that's that is also something to know. So yeah, the use of MuseScore with a screen reader is a pretty cool thing. that um, yeah, if you have someone who's basically more or less completely blind, the combination of keyboard with screen reader is the key to being able to use this. So I did say alt right. Yeah, I know it sucks. Um, so what's the easiest way to increase measure length artificially? So actually, okay, there's a number of ways of doing that. The thing that I always suggest as the easiest, if you think about not increasing the length, but realizing that MuseScore is going to justify everything, right? These measures are really narrow, but instead of thinking about making them wider, what if I just put a line break in and I'm going to hit enter? And so now I've got a line break there, and the measures got wider because there's fewer of them. Now, if you need one measure wider than the others, the shortcut for that is the curly braces. Left curly brace makes skinnier, right curly brace makes wider. These commands are called the stretch commands, and they're under the format menu, stretch. And then there's the reset layout stretch. So that will make measures wider and narrower, but normally I don't like to think about doing that. I think about putting in line breaks where I want. Although sometimes I need to use the stretch command to make things narrower because why to make line breaks will allow things to get wider, but they won't allow things to get narrower. So uh, and does my course about MuseScore teach everything? Yeah, everything that I've talked about here, I think, is probably covered in the course, although I don't know that I really go into detail about some of the real specific stuff, like how I use tab to get up to the toolbars. There's a separate lesson on accessibility in the handbook that covers some of those details, but pretty much everything else that I've covered in here is covered in my course for sure. Um, space between staves is another thing where right now the default settings in MuseScore tries to spread things out to kind of fill a page a bit. So like if I start adding some more things, it doesn't like fill the whole page right away. But as soon as you get up to 5 system, it says, all right, that's enough to fill the page with, and I want to do that. But there's all sorts of options to control this under format, style, page. There's these. So first of all, there's one option that just enables the spread at all. You can just disable that completely, and then everything just doesn't try to spread at all. And then you're just setting distance directly, what the distance between staves are. It does do it does do spreading of systems, but not staves within systems. So you can set a minimum and maximum. So like this is telling me the minimum should be 8.5, but if I turn that up, it's going to put more space, except why isn't it? Oh, because I set my max, it was already up to the max. So it'll float the distance between these. So anyhow, there's tons of settings here. If I turn on the justification again, there's all these settings that control how it's going to spread staves out, because that will actually spread staves out within a system. If you've got a system of like 5 staves for 5 different instruments, it'll spread the staves within the system as well as spread the systems out. And there's tons of different controls for that sort of thing. So, so the piano keyboard's too large, so control zoom to make it smaller. There you go. So that's a thing also. Yeah, so depending on how big it is, the default I thought was basically the size that I'm seeing right now, but yeah, I've customized so many things that I never remember what the default size is. And it could well be that depending on, again, your display size and how MuseScore is able to detect your screen resolution, it might be showing up bigger than it's supposed to be. That's possible also. So anyhow, I hope that people got something out of this tour. This is a tour of not so much specific features of the program, but features of how to use the program in maybe ways that you might not have thought of. And along the way, maybe you saw a feature that you didn't know about, which is always my hope. So hope you enjoyed. Tomorrow I will be back with my music masterclass. So I always encourage people, just go back to, if you go to the top of the chat, you see the link to my site. You'll see where you can sign up for the music masterclass. It's free, and just go ahead and do that. And then come back here, basically the same place tomorrow, same time, and I'll be talking about music. as opposed to talking about MuseScore. And then again, this weekend I'll be doing this presentation on teaching music to blind and visually impaired students, and I'm really looking forward to that. Next week, back with more cafe. So hope everyone has enjoyed this, and yeah, I definitely I enjoy doing these, and I'm still planning on writing myself some theme music. So we'll see what I come up with maybe by next week. So thanks again, everyone, and I will see you next time. I'm gonna see if I can end the stream from my phone. Am I still here? I don't know if this worked to end it. So yeah, I think that didn't work the last time I tried it either.